everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules to come tonight and show your continued interest in our wonderful library and for helping us bring it forward to the next phase of enriching and assisting our community. So tonight we're going to have about a 45-minute long presentation, which will be led by the President of the Board of Trustees, Hildy Karp, who's here. I should mention I'm Heather Marvel. I'm one of the trustees as well. Of course, we also have our wonderful library director, Melissa Kopecki, and the architects from H3. Hildy will speak briefly about how we came to this project and where we are, and then H3 will really delve into the details of what we envision this project to be. That'll take about 45 minutes. After that, we'll have a microphone here for questions from the floor. We'll just ask that you think about your questions and try to keep them brief because we have a decent-sized crowd of people who we believe are very passionate about the library and I have a lot of questions. So with that, I'll hand it over to Hildy.
Great. Thanks very much for coming tonight. And I really want to, can everybody hear me? No.
It's on, just talk closer.
Is that better? So I really want to start by thanking the village trustees for their support of the library and the vote that they had on Monday night to move forward with the library-only plan. It was a vote in concept, so we're going to continue to move forward on the work. And I want to say a special thank you to Karen Hilton for the countless hours that she's put in to help move this forward. Karen wanted me to say she had a family commitment tonight. She's really disappointed she wasn't able to be here. So I think we can all agree that libraries are really essential community spaces. They're essential for our civic life, our intellectual life, to promote equity. And we know these spaces need tending and care and funding. And the library staff and the board have been working for a long time to move forward with a renovation of this building and a restoration and connection to our beautiful original library next door. The library staff started a library spaces working group in 2008. We did a community survey in 2012 to really hear about the needs and how people use the library. We received a planning grant from the state, which allowed us to hire a firm to do a soup to nuts analysis of both buildings and really begin to think about the spaces and what we could do. We did another community survey in 2017 and ran some focus groups with a variety of constituencies in 2018 with teens, with seniors, with parents of young children. And we know from all this work that we need more flexible space, more quiet space, more meeting rooms, a bigger children's room. And the library's really done a wonderful job at utilizing what we have, but we know we need more and different space to really meet the needs of the community. And so that really brings us to today. So in anticipation of applying for the New Jersey Library Construction Bond Act, the library, in partnership with the village, has hired H3 to build on all the work that the library's been doing since 2008. So H3 was actually hired to evaluate whether or not we could build a municipal complex housing both the library and the village offices. H3 came up with 3 options, but ultimately came to the conclusion that that isn't efficient for either the library or the municipal government to share this space. And the village board of trustees voted on Monday night in principle to move forward with H3's library-only plan. So there wasn't a commitment of funds, but it's clear that we're going to move forward with library-only space in these two buildings, so there won't be municipal offices here. And so this is the plan that you're really going to hear about in detail tonight. And just a few things to note. H3's design is focused on flexible space. So you might see something named as teen or messy space, but all the spaces are meant to be used for multiple purposes depending on the time of the day, and the spaces are meant to be able to accommodate any changes in programming, some of which we might not even be able to anticipate. So this should take us really far into the future. The other thing that I wanted to make sure to say is that when H3 talks about program, they aren't talking about the library's specific programming. They're not talking about story hour. They're talking more broadly about the broad streams of offering at the library and the spaces that accommodate those streams. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. And we, the library board and the library staff, are really excited about this plan. It's really going to take the library far into the future and really meet what the community needs. So I'm going to turn it over to the folks at H3 so they can talk to you about the plan in detail.
All right, thanks, Hildy. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. My name is John Fontillis, and I'm a principal of the firm H3 in New York. I'm joined tonight by Nathan Ritgarn, to my right, who's a senior associate with the firm, and an architect with a broad range of experience in public buildings, libraries, and civic institutions. And on my far right, Daria Pizzetta, who is also a principal of the firm, and she's an author of the Library Bible, which is called Building Blocks Planning Functional Library Space. Emphasis on functional, I think. And we're so glad tonight to be here. Quite honestly, on Monday night, we were at SOPL at a very dark room, looking out, couldn't see anything. The microphone didn't work, the visuals were bright lights. I know some of you who were there couldn't see anything. But it's great to actually be in a place, frankly, where the library is your passion. This is a place that you all have given a lot of your lives to and your time and treasure. And we wanted to make sure that we presented to you our recommendations based on a year-long study that we've done with a working group composed of library board members, some of the village trustees, to really delve into this question of how to make a 21st century library for South Orange. Now, some of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight, we talked about on Monday night, but what we do want to do tonight is actually take a little bit more extra time. We only had 10 minutes. We were trying to rush through that night. So we want to stretch it out a little bit. If you have questions, as Heather mentioned, we want to hear those from you. This is an opportunity to really kind of test what we've put together and make sure that this is a plan that works for you. So partly, I want to leave it open and get through this presentation so we have plenty of time for questions. So a lot of work was done prior to us coming on board in planning for the library. A lot of you were involved in the master planning effort back in 2013, 2012, 2013. It was a fantastic, very thick report that Hildy handed to us the first day. I mean, what else are we going to do? I mean, it looks like you've done quite a bit of work. But a lot of that work was really to understand what the buildings were at that time. In a way, their architectural needs, their functions, the condition of the buildings. And the result of that actually are several historic preservation grants that have been enacted over the past couple of years for the roof, for the windows, that have come to pass. So the 2013 plan was very influential to stabilizing the buildings and making them safe for a new plan to work them into a new library facility. So I just wanted to say, we aren't starting from scratch. You all did great work back then. Our intent was to extend upon that and prepare you for a series of funding questions that are going to come up over the next couple of years related to the construction bond grant. So the three things that the working group asked us to look at were to define concepts for programming, which Daria will talk about in a second, to develop space plans based on the current needs and expected growth for the library over time, which Nathan will get to later on, and really to set forth a vision for what the library should be dedicated to the community. In other words, making sure that the library is something that you all here in South Orange can continue to support and feel pride in going forward. We have a lot of experience with facilities like yours. Can you go to the next? We've done a series of master plans and renovations for community libraries in Nassau County, in Columbia, Missouri, Milledgeville, Georgia. One recent example across the river is our renovation for a 1960s era building in the village of Harrison, New York. They had a strong emphasis on their children's section. You can see some of those images on the right there, and a large meeting space down on the lower left. Next. We've also modernized and created connections from older buildings to newer buildings, both at the West Point campus, at the city of New Haven next to Yale, and we're also doing two Carnegie libraries in the borough of Brooklyn in New York. At Vassar, the Ingram Library, which is the addition on the right, connected two wings of the main academic library to create a new focal point and entrance. And we combined both the old and the new to provide a purpose-built facility for library study at Vassar. Next. And lastly, we've done quite a few civic libraries around the nation. We've done work at the Portland Multnomah County Library, the Cleveland Public Library, the Los Angeles Central Library, that renovation back in the late 80s. This is a project we did in Savannah, Georgia, All of these projects have received awards from the national organizations, the American Library Association and the American Institute of Architects. We understand how important these libraries are to the culture and the fabric of the community. We want to make sure that anything we do here in South Orange has lasting value in a civic sense for the entire community. So let me mention a couple of notes about your existing buildings here. The current library here, as we all know, is in the 1968 building, which was a little scary when I thought about it, because that's when I was born. Now, people, we improve with character and age, I think. Sometimes buildings get a little worn and tired, and they do need rejuvenation and maintenance. The 68 building has served you quite well in this amount of time. But it also was built as a replacement for the building next door, the Conant building, which was built in 1896. I assume most of you have been in that building in the past 10 years or so? Or yes, no, maybe? Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, we had a tour of it, and EIES, right, was a nonprofit that had been housed there for about a decade or so?
Several decades.
Several decades, right. Well, I mean, they kept it in pretty good shape. I mean, there are some weird things going on, a lot of wood paneling from the 1970s, but it's in pretty good shape, and quite honestly, if you got cleaned up a bit, it would make a fantastic library. As you all know, that was the first library built in 1896 for South Orange. It was part of that great sort of movement here with the train station and all the sort of the municipal buildings that were built back then. And the library was built, that first portion of the library was built in 1896, and an addition was added in 1930. Can we go to the next? Just this, you all know this. Here is a blow-up of the site plan. The two buildings are relatively close to each other. There's about a distance of about 40, 50 feet in between them. And then the parking lot behind. Go to the next. As we always know, unfortunately, parking is an issue everywhere we go in most development projects. The parking lot has now 107 spaces. When we looked at the parking ratios, what would be required for a library, and actually part of what we were also studying was the village offices as well, we tried to understand what the ratios be required to do that. And if you were only talking about the library staff and patrons visiting the library and the village staff, perfect, that's 100 spaces. But wouldn't have left any space, or you would require additional space for anybody visiting the village offices. So that was one of the kind of the key issues, that if we were trying to put the village offices on this site in addition to the library, the parking just would not have worked. Let alone all the cars that were coming in, trying to get in either on Comstock or Taylor. And I already know, it was one of the very first things early on, the traffic come on Scotland, the speeds of people coming down that county road, trying to get all these cars into this space is a very difficult thing. So the parking issue was one of the key drivers as to really considering maybe reducing the program to just the library. So the next issue was, how do we connect the Connect with the 1968 building, with the idea that the Connect, obviously being empty now with that tenant leaving, owned by the village, is a perfect way to, in a way, retie back into the history of the neighborhood, the Montrose Park Historic District, as well as a space that could be used for library purposes. And Derry will get into why we think the square footage of the Connect, if it were connected to the 1968 building, seemed to be the most logical and sort of a win-win in terms of trying to put together a plan. So let me just go through quickly the existing plans in the building, if I can see if this works. So we have here the Connect building. Here's Scotland Road on the bottom. Here's the parking lot on the top. Here's the building that we're in on, and we're looking at right now the lower level. So this is the level right now. You come in from the parking lot to the back. Here's the children's space. Here's the meeting room that's downstairs. And then there is library back of house facilities in the northwest corner, or northeast corner. In the Connect building, they're mostly in the front, underneath. This is below grade. You know, Scotland is here, it's a level up. This is all below grade. This used to be the cellar, the boiler rooms, and a lot of mechanical spaces for the Connect building. And there are a couple of spaces back here that could be repurposed for office space as well as back of house library space. Can we go next? On the first level, here's Scotland Road again. You know that entrance that goes to that big arched entry to the Connect building. And as I said earlier, a lot of these rooms are in pretty good shape. The wainscot, the great oak wainscot, the doors are those original 2-inch thick doors on giant brass hinges that you never see. Well, I'll never see again because you can't seem to make those types of doors again. And then a great sort of stair hall, but then back here, what used to be a 2-story high meeting room has been subdivided. It has, you know, really ceilings that are around 7 feet tall. I'm not really sure why anyone wanted to do that, and there's really this weird 1970s basement wall paneling all over the place. But if you clean that all up, this would make a fantastic meeting room in the back because it has the height, it has the space for it. We're sitting right here in this, I'm sorry, yes, no, here, in this corner. And Melissa's office, library offices here, and the big open room that we're in right now, and then the stacks here. Go to the next. And then if you, in the 968 building, the sort of mezzanine level, which is up here, is the only other portion of this building that has access to an upper level. In the Connect building, most of these are attic spaces, so they have the big triangular roof areas. These used to have these beautiful lay lights or skylights that would bring light down into the reading rooms down below. And there's some strange kind of attic spaces here that you could repurpose as offices, but unfortunately there is no elevator access there. You would have to get a lift or handicapped accessibility up to those levels in order to make them accessible. So that's sort of the general lay of the land. I'm going to hand it over now to Darian to talk through the big picture.
So it's really delightful actually to be in this room because this verifies and reinforces all the great qualities about your library. And I've done a lot of library design in my career, but just being able to sit here and see the flexibility of the space, you don't really appreciate this when, you know, I'm having conversations with Melissa. Oh, I just clear all the tables away and put chairs in, and that's where we do our big programming. To actually see this, working with this is great. And also, too, to sit here and have this vantage point and know that from the circulation desk, you can see, you have visual control over the entire library space. So you have many, many qualities in your library that many people hope to design into their new libraries. So we hope to replicate all these, but we hope to actually make it better. Because it is a little, just looking around at the finishes and some of the furniture, it could be updated, it could be made to be a lot better. And also the expansion too would help you then make a connection between the Connect building and this building. And when we did the evaluation, I mean, we've been brainstorming about this for over a year. We wanted to see how to update the Connect, how to join them into this wonderful assembly of spaces with the Link building. So we started to look at the quantity of your needs, your spatial needs here. And when we say programming, it's about spatial programming. We have done some extensive sessions with the library to look at what activities are held here, how the library uses the space, and also then at all the quantities of the books, the number of people who need to be at tables and chairs and lounge chairs, and the different areas of the building to construct a building program. And this is all about the quantity. So when you look at what you currently have, there's about 26,000 square foot of space between the existing building and the Connect building, but what you really need is another 4,000 square feet of space and 30,000 square feet to make this work. And that is really, that's what the Link is going to be designed to be, is this 4,000 square foot connection between this building and the Connect building. We also look at, the great pieces that are here and the things that we want to keep. And some of the things that we really like about this building is the natural light. So these big windows, they really work in your favor. And that's one of the reasons why I'm glad that nothing is going to be built in your parking lot, because that would block the light. That was one of the first exercises we did, was seeing if we could put a parking deck over there, and it would just have put shadows onto this building. That would not have been very nice. You also have some wonderful green space around your building. And we have, one of our schemes shows how the children's department can be connected to the outside and how this green space can be utilized for further programming. And we also looked at when we do the design in the future, what are the appropriate materials to join a building that was built in 1896 with a building that was built in 1968, because your exterior palette is very different. So these are all sorts of things that we looked at during the programming phase. And those are the qualities that we were looking at. Then we focused on the cost. So we actually worked through 3 schemes, 2 of them which included the village offices, and one of them, when that was solely the library, to see exactly what it would cost to implement these schemes. We are working towards a submission for the New Jersey State Library Construction Bond Act, a very long title. There's $125 million on the table from the state, but there's been 170 people who put in requests for this money. So we really need to have a really great submission that stands out so that ours is noticed and that the project gets funded. I went back and looked at some of the regulations that were posted in July by the state, and all the criteria, you meet all the criteria for what they're looking for in a submission. There's the eligibility is for constructing a new building, for rehabilitating an existing building, for repairs for the public library building. It also covers acquisitions of some equipment and furniture. And also there's some soft cost involved in that too, so moving expenses and renting an off-site storage area. Those all could be part of the submission for the bond money. But also too, the programming exercise, we were focusing on making sure that we enhance the public library experience. That we looked at giving you digital access to materials too. So these are the things, there's criteria that they're going to grade you on basically, and you meet all the criteria. So it was a really great exercise to go through, to look at what the library needs, how the existing building can be reused and repurposed, and then to make sure that we're always checking ourselves against the Construction Bond Act requirements to make sure that we're going to meet all the criteria. We've been working with what we call the working group, and it's been sort of a checks and balances, so that we've been talking to the library staff, but also talking to the village to make sure that we're balanced and we're not providing things that are the Cadillac version of everything, but what is actually needed for the community. And then we've been through numerous iterations of, can both the library and the village offices fit here? Sadly, it doesn't work very well. So it's only for the library space. So this basically, we call this process, the building programming process is basically, we were making the puzzle pieces so that when it's time for the design, we assemble the puzzle pieces into a design and end up then with a building. So this is more of and I wish the slide was a little bit bigger and clearer, but these are all the parts and pieces of your library. And this is how we actually go about programming. We sit with the library staff. We have a series of questions. We ask them about the activities and the quantities of the materials and the number of people and the times of day that you use your library. And we sketch. Architects are very visual people, so we like to put together little sketches, and this defines what goes into each one of the spaces. This then becomes a little booklet, and we complement it with a data sheet that tells you everything that goes into the building or into the space via power outlets and data outlets and what type of light fixtures would best be in there and the sort of finishes. So that's when we say programming, that's what we mean is building programming, and we make these sort of charts. We did the same exercise too with the village hall, and these are all their parts and pieces, but they're going to have to go find someplace else to be or stay where they are, which is they have a nice office space over there, so that's probably the ideal there. So these are the ideals. So if we look at the program in summary, we have the Planet building, which provides about 9,000 square feet of space. It is most useful for meeting rooms. for some reading rooms and for staff areas. And then we have the 1968 building, which is most useful for the children's department and the adult department on different floors probably. And then some of the other sort of small meeting rooms that are very desirable now. A lot of library collaboration takes place these days, where you have people coming together to either do book clubs or some other sort of small meetings, or they're working on, if their students are working on papers together. And so it's very helpful to have a series of smaller meeting rooms. And we understand too from talking to the village and to the library that what South Orange really misses, or is delinquent on, is places for meetings. You have a new community center that's under renovations too, but still, this is really, we need these rooms and these types of spaces in the library. The greatest increases in our program, actually, our recommendations are for the children's department. Currently, it's only about 2,000 square feet of space, and we're suggesting that we double it, a little bit more actually, to 4,300 square feet, so the children can have their own program room, their own place to be messy, and their own place to have a much more expanded collection, and a lot more stroller parking too. So all good things. And then the remainder of the library, is redistributed through the available space, and there will be staff offices, a few over here, but for the most part, we're going to move them over into the Connet building.
All right, I'm going to take you through the schemes. It's important to remember that these are only concept schemes, so as we move forward with the design, it'll continue to evolve and we'll continue to revise based on feedback from the village, or from the library and from you. So option A was the one we talked about earlier, where we really had the library on the ground floor and the first floor, and then on top of it we were stacking the village offices. And what starts to happen is you start to realize you really lose the character of the 1968 building. It starts to engulf the building. And then another thing we looked at was the parking, as Daria and John had described. We looked at it a couple different ways. First was a platform, which provides 160 spots. The problem with that is you're only gaining 60 spots, and the cost of doing this is $3 to $4 million. So that kind of ruled that one out. And then the parking garage, you gain a lot more spots, 326 spots. But as you can start to see in this section, it's clearly out of context. And you start to block, in the bottom image, you can see all of your natural light is impacted. And then going through the plans. So the red areas are basically the back-of-house library staff areas. The gray areas is the service areas, so the restrooms. These are your incoming services. So basically all of those are coming off of kind of the Scotland roadside. The children's is on the ground floor, like it is now. Basically we had a new programming room and some additional space off to the parking lot side for meetings. On the first floor, we had predominantly the adult area. You have kind of all of the meeting rooms adjacent to the new library connector, and then the reading rooms remain in the current location. And then the mezzanine is really, it's really just the book stacks you see up above, and then a staff area in the connect. And then the village offices was really the second and third floor. Everything you see there.
So that would have been all new construction?
That would have been all new construction. And part of the challenge with this was you have to create new structure through your existing structure to build up, which it increases the cost significantly, and it was a little bit out of context and scale. So option B was really looking at trying to scale down and kind of find places where we could share function between the village and the library. So things like meeting rooms that could be shared, restrooms, pantry spaces. So essentially what you end up doing is condensing the village offices to the first floor, and the library to the ground floor, and the library to the first floor. So on the ground floor, we had a new entrance dedicated to the village offices. Off of the parking lot side, we have kind of the dedicated library entrance. Again, we have the back-of-house library staff areas in the kind of the base of the Connect. Basically, the restrooms, we're trying to share some pantry space between the village offices and the library back-of-house staff. And then as you move up to the first floor, you have kind of all the meeting spaces directly adjacent to the lobby and the new connector. The reading rooms still in the kind of the front of the Connect. And then the children's moves up to the first floor along with the adult and teen area in blue there. And one of the issues we found with this scheme is that it kind of creates a scattered program, so the adult areas are not consolidated. It's a little patchwork-like, which is a little bit inefficient. And then finally, the third option is the library-only option, where
Can I just say that this is the option that the village has agreed to, is the option that Nathan's going over now, the library only.
so it's a more modest option where we really retain the character of the Connect and the 1968 building and just do a more simple link in between these two buildings to make them work. So on the ground floor, what we have is you have the service entrance, which is an existing door for back of house. Kind of the storage for the library staff is built, embedded into the ground. You have some office space that has nice natural light for the library there. And then you have the new connector becomes the main entrance from the parking lot side. Off of that, you have an accessible elevator that can take you up to the ground floor. You have kind of an eat and work area in pink there, and then a couple smaller meeting rooms for 2 to 3 people, and kind of a friends, which could also function as an additional meeting room. And then another thing we were trying to do here is create kind of double height space. So a portion of this lobby is open to the lobby above. And then off to the 1968 building, you have the children's. And we've done a couple things. The services remain off of Scotland, kind of embedded to the ground. You have a nice big new program room. And then we're trying to reuse all of the plumbing from the current restroom location, but renovate that to make it into 4 family restrooms, which is more, it was a huge request that we had. It's more useful restrooms for the children's area. And then off of that, we also have an outdoor space directly adjacent to children's. And we were looking at kind of like a fenced-in area that would be protected as well, so it's not open to the parking lot. Moving up to the first floor, you start to see the open to below, the lobby space. We have more of the meeting rooms for 6 to 8 people. We have kind of the restrooms between the 68 building and the new connector. And then you have the large meeting room that John was describing. If we take out the existing floor plate, it's a really nice gable. It's a double height space. And this would accommodate about 75 people. So you'd be able to do some of your village after hours meetings as well. The other nice thing about this is that security-wise, you can basically close off the library from the Connect portion of the project. So any after hours events could happen there. We've maintained the reading rooms. Another thing we've added though is an accessible entry from the Scotland side through the Connect. We're still maintaining the entrance you have off the 68 building, but this provides another accessible entrance from Scotland. And then moving into the space we're in right now, it's a really open, flexible space, much like you have now. So we're showing the teen area anchoring one corner. We're showing local history anchoring another corner. You have the library director and staff in the red there. The stacks remain where they are. And then you basically have the circ desk on one side and the reference desk on the other. So there's a good sight line to capture the whole room in terms of surveillance. And then on the upper second floor of the Connect and the mezzanine, the Connect would basically be a staff area. It's also your access to the roof. And then there's additional staff area here. It ends up kind of acting as the pantry for the staff lounge. And then in terms of budget and funding, so if we look at the option C, the total cost is the $12.54 million. It's $409 per square foot, but we've also looked at this in terms of phases. So phase 1 is the Connect and the new connector piece, and because of the historic nature of the Connect, it's a little more expensive to renovate that portion of the project. There's a little bit more unknowns, so that's $7 million. And then phase 2 is really renovating the 68 building that we're in now, and that's $5.54 million. There's a few add alternates that we've looked at. Some of the things that I described, so the Connect, the accessible entryway from the Scotland side, that was $42,000. And then for the 68 building, there's a few items that don't really need to be replaced today, but they're getting close to their life. Currently, the rooftop units, the roof itself, and then the windows are rather, well, they're from 1968. So in terms of building the most efficient envelope, those are all things that could be upgraded. And just for reference, another library project that's happening simultaneously in the neighboring town of Maplewood, this just kind of puts in context the kind of cost per square foot that they're looking at. So the $554. It's a pretty significant renovation, which is a little bit more along the lines of our option A. So this is kind of breaking up all of the three options. Option A came to around $28 million, and then the parking structure for the platform was 3 to 4. The garage was $8 million. That's really what made those infeasible. Option B was around $15 million, and then in option C that we just went through, we kind of scaled that back even more. Another important thing to think about is the soft costs. So these are like the design fees for the design team. It's whatever the bond interest that's approved by the village and by you as taxpayers. And then phasing and temporary relocation costs. So in terms of phasing, this is just a quick diagram that kind of shows how phase 1 would work. Essentially, the 68 building could stay open as a library while this project is going on, and then you could move into the Connect and the connector while phase 2 is going on. And finally, just escalation. It's always important to think about, so right now this is, those costs were based on starting the project in January of 2021. So that's about a year of design time between now and 2021. As those move further back, those tend to increase. And then just looking at grant and fundraising opportunities. I don't know if Jerry, if you want to talk about this at all?
So the question is, where does the money come from? And as I noted before, there is the New Jersey Library Construction Bond Act. I think John said that it passed in 2017, and then in drips and drabs we've been receiving information about it. So we do know what the rules of the game are, or the draft rules of the game are. When the rules were issued in July, there was a 60-day question period where people could submit questions, and right now the questions are under review, and the final, I don't want to call it draft, but the final act will soon be hopefully issued, so we know that what are all the requirements for actually applying for the funding. So that is one way to get some of the money for the project is through this bond act. Not unfortunately, but fortunately, they will fund up to half your project, but there's some evaluation on that as to what is actually going to be funded and how much per square foot they will actually fund. You can actually, too, do a library campaign. So we know that other municipalities have gone out to the public and done fundraising. This may require to hire a professional fundraising consultant so that they can advise you on where to go, who to seek funds from, which corporations are the best givers, what kind of grants are available. And through this corporate grants and other foundations, you can probably raise some money that way. And then one of the opportunities you have actually is through the historic grants that are available. That is how I believe the roof was funded, the new roof that's on the Connet, how the windows are being replaced, and how the building envelope is being upgraded. So there are many other ones that will help with the upgrading and rehabilitation too of the Connet Library.
So if I could, in a way, 3 takeaways. We sort of reached the end of the presentation, but there are 3 things I do want to leave you with. First is, this is one step in a very long process. The next step really is to, now that we've gotten the agreement from the trustees, to move ahead to prepare that application. The thought process right now is if the draft regulations are accepted as final, they will probably put that out in November, December as the application process to begin. And that means in 60 days after that, you all would have to, with our help, put together an application to go to Trenton for X amount of funding for a project. And as Daria said, there are a whole bunch of other municipalities in New Jersey that are doing the same thing. Some may be asking for a lot of money. Some maybe for a couple of $1 billion, maybe for accessibility or a new elevator or fixing a mechanical unit. But the idea is that we want to put together a very comprehensive application package so that you are well positioned to getting some of that bond funding. Because it's a long process, because frankly, we can't do anything unless we know what we're going to spend. We got to have a budget first. And it may be that, frankly, Maplewood may be asking for $10 million. They may not get $10 million. So they may have to do, they may have a cold shower ahead and having to redesign their entire project to whatever funding they are going to get. Now, obviously, we want to make sure that South Orange can apply for as much as they can get. But a lot of what we've done over the past year is to, my second point, to balance the wants and the needs as to what South Orange really needs in their library. There were a lot of things that we could add to the library program, and quite honestly, we kept testing back and forth, and we've now gotten to the point where there are certain things that you have to have. Those needs are the things that you really want the library to have. And barring any other funding that's coming down the pike, those are the things that have to be in this application. We want to make sure that what you submit is the key items that will make this library strong, not only for today, but also for the future. There are a lot of other things we can load up. You know, that Christmas tree can have a lot of other ornaments on it, but you know, frankly, we want to make sure that you're asking for the right amount of money in the right way. So a lot of the next couple of months will be putting together that application, so it reads correctly that this is a process that you all have participated in. These are the things that we've come together as saying are the most important, and therefore that's what the state should fund. The second big item is the idea that public buildings do cost a lot of money, and especially in this metro region, the cost of construction, we don't think $400 to $500 a square foot is out of range, and that's construction cost. In addition to that, there are soft costs, there are the costs of moving, the costs of relocation that are over and above that $400 to $500 cost. And I will tell you, a lot of what a lot of people ask is, well, I mean, you know, we built a commercial building for $200 a square foot, or that building down the street was only $300 a square foot. Why are you spending $400 to $500? And the reason why, and we've seen it over and over again, the civic institutions have a different mission. You're not trying to build something that gets you by 20 years. You want to build something that you can be proud of and use for 50, for the next 50 years. And frankly, that costs money. $400, $500 a square foot. We try to get it down to the minimum that we think, and we think that 406 is a really good number. Not too much, not too little. We think we can get a very good project out of that. But it is a substantial amount of money, I know, for a town of your size. And a lot of the discussion we had on Monday night is, what's the impact on taxes? What's the impact on having to go out and fundraise for this amount of money? It is a lot of money, and we understand that. But there is sort of a base level of achieving the type of projects you need and the cost that's related to that. Now, lastly, in a way, what we've decided, as Daria mentioned earlier, is that we're trying to figure out the puzzle pieces. Another way we've talked about it, in a way, is when you're trying to bake a cake, what are the ingredients you want to choose, right? Is it a chocolate cake? Is it a raspberry cake? That's the stage we're at right now. We're trying to decide what we're going to put in this cake. How we bake it, how it tastes, is for another time, when we get to understanding what the funding stream is, what the support for the library is later, both on the municipal side as well as you all. And that's in a way, a process. Once we get through this time period of establishing what the parameters are, that's when we really want to come back to you and really get into the design. What we want to get to the point early next year is to submit something that has strength to it, that is backed up by the 6 years that you all have been master planning this project, that it will be an application that has a lot of thought put into it. But design is not part of that yet. I think I want to just stress that the images that we put in are not going to be fancy renderings. They're going to be really solid plans, lists of items that we believe the funding agency will understand in terms of what the aim is. So in a way, it's a good thing that we have a lot to look forward to working with you once we get to the point where we can actually decide on the design. And I think in a way, you have a facility here that has great bones. Needs a little bit of sprucing up here and there, but I think you have the type of facility that could be strong, not just for today, but for the next 50 years. So with that, I think we just want to turn it over to questions if anybody has any.
Can you guys go back to option C so we can
Okay, great. So we're going to open it up to questions. If you could come up here if you have a question or comment, please. If you're unable to come up because you're hemmed in or you just can't make it up for another reason, raise your hand and I'll come over and try to get your question from you. We would just ask if you have a kind of extensive comment that might be better saved for another time, you can email it to Melissa and she'll collect those and we'll make sure that we take those into consideration as well. So please come up and any questions you may have for the architects or for Hildy or Melissa.
Hi, and thank you for this, and thank you for being willing to take our questions. I have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna try and limit it. One is, what kind of, you mentioned the window replacements so that we're a more efficient building or two buildings. What other green initiatives are we kind of looking into? Since we're gonna be digging a lot and doing a lot of construction, I know Melissa scored these amazing shelves from another library that are stored downstairs in the Connect building. Are we going to be using salvaged materials? And then also, since we're doing that digging out front for the kids' space, are we considering maybe putting some bioswales in there for water management through the parking lot? All right, that's my first line of questions, and then I'll be back, I promise.
I mean, we really haven't got into the landscape features. We would have a separate team of consultants that would be joining us as we move into like a schematic design phase. But in terms of materials, as Daria knows, we would always be working with sustainable materials. It's become kind of a standard. It's not an exception anymore. And then also in terms of like plumbing fixtures, low water consumption, those are all kind of standard too. In terms of big picture sustainable items, solar is something that we've thought about, but we don't have a lot of space on the roof. Currently, the 68 building houses all of the rooftop units for it. And the new link would be housing the new rooftop units for really the Connect and the link. So it's something we just have to study further moving forward.
One part of the application for the funding is actually to submit your statement to obtain LEED certification, so that's Leadership in Energy Environmental Design. And so the state is thinking about this too, so they really do want you to be a green building. And also then you have to submit your statement of intent for your well certification. So both of those things are going to be considered in the application.
And I think in terms of the furniture, this is something we would be working with the library. You know, if there's pieces of furniture to reuse that are, you know, giving it another layer of character. You know, currently we have a budget for all new furniture that was included in that 12.54 million, but you know, it doesn't all have to be new. You know.
Thank you. I know I came in late. My concern is, are we talking about a library? Or are we talking about a library plus offices for this community? I didn't hear the beginning, but I've read about offices in between the library shelves, and I'm completely opposed to making the library part of our office building, and our office people who get elected and changed every year and don't have a library philosophy one bit.
I will say that the village trustees agree with you. I think after we had showed them two of the schemes that we showed earlier, Scheme A and Scheme B, they realized that the amount of money that would be used to build offices on top of the library would be money not well spent. Mainly because of all the things that would have to go with it. They wouldn't have all the space they needed, number one. Number two, the parking required for all their use would essentially build a 4-story parking garage out in your parking lot. And so basically what we've come back with is, with agreement with the village trustees, to do a library-only plan.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because nothing the village trustees does these days seems to be for the benefit of the people of the community. And so, okay, I shouldn't talk about that.
Other questions, comments?
I'm wondering how much research has been done into the future of libraries. We're at a technological point. Are you thinking of expanding the books actually in the collection? Is that part of the budget, and how would that impact be like? And what are we going to be doing in 50 years in the library? Just so.
I've been a card-carrying member of the American Library Association for probably the past 25 years, because that's a lot of what my practice has been on. And for all of the sessions that I attend at their annual conference, the book is not going away.
Right.
There is more things in publication now than there ever has been. So paper's not leaving us. It's supplemented with ebooks. The only thing that I've seen that has changed drastically has been reference collections. So you don't have a, there used to be miles of encyclopedias and other books that you had to, house. That's changed. All of your references now are electronically subscriptions. But books are not going away. We still are keeping the majority of the stacks that are here. I think you may plan sometime to weed some of the older materials, because Melissa knows what circulates and what doesn't. So that should probably be taken out of the library when you do the renovation. But for the most part, keep your book stacks.
And the same number of book spaces, or would that be increased?
The children's collections, because they are squeezed in there now, they are greatly increasing. The adult collection, I believe, kind of stays about the same.
Part of the master plan that we did involve looking at the collection, analyzing it, and figuring out a right size of collection.
Or I'm the lady who's quieter with the mic, but sounds more polite. But
what works for the size of the community and the kinds of things you have. The technology thing has provided us to do a lot of less minutia work because nobody needs us for trivia answers anymore, which is kind of great because they can just find it on their phone. But then they have the luxury of coming to us to do real in-depth research, which we know you can't do just on the open internet necessarily. So as far as physical spaces, I mean, maybe some of the spaces and the ALA and the NJLA and every librarian thinks about this all the time, but some of the spaces that we have found just for technology, it's not just providing, which is very important, internet and wireless printing and wireless internet to people, computing, things they could borrow and compute with, but to come in and try new technologies, things you're not going to have the opportunity to do on your own. So from artificial intelligence to green screen to 3D printing. I mean, we were one of the first libraries in the state to have a 3D printer, just so people could see what it was and imagine what the next step with that was, and come in and try it for themselves when they had no need to have one for themselves. So I think the need for spaces, some of the things you might do with it, yeah, maybe the collection will go down a little bit, but you know, the raise in ebooks, the use of ebooks has gone up, but it's pretty incremental because in comparison to hard copy books, because that also incrementally increases. So, I'm gonna stop talking.
Well, you already answered my question about LEED certification, so thank goodness you'll be doing that. But of course, as you know, there are various gradations of LEED certification, so go for the top. Go as much as you possibly can. And it'd be great to sort of think big about this. I know there are a lot of limitations. A green roof would just be wonderful. Water abatement would really be wonderful. Reusing rainwater, if possible, would also be a great idea. So as much as you can, even small little garden space outside, as long as the soil is well tested. So these are some things, even though the spaces are confined, even though the outdoor space in particular would be great for the kids to be able to have an outdoor growing space as well. So those are a couple of suggestions.
Those are all great ideas. We'll keep those in the mix.
Thanks, Judith. Judith and I also serve on the foundation as well as Tonya. So my question is a little bit more around everything else that's being built right in this area. So the Blockbuster site, what we affectionately call the Blockbuster site, is going to become a 5-story humongous building, particularly when you compare it next to the small building that is staying, what we call the Mark Murphy building. So I'm wondering, what are we going to do here? I mean, we were talking about keeping the light, keeping the design, but I am very anxious that this is going to be dwarfed by the size of that building, and what can we do proactively to protect our small little space, because it is a relatively small footprint.
Well, I think from the very beginning, we were asked to consider the 2 buildings here at the parking lot and the green space as part of a campus, a library campus. So everything that we've been looking at in terms of the site planning was to maximize the daylight, maximize the open space, to create opportunities, either front porch to the Connect building, out to Scotland, to try and also maybe pedestrianize Scotland, slow down the traffic in some way. In other words, the area from Comstock to Taylor, Scotland to to Giorgio's, I guess. Because we don't occupy those houses there, unless the trustees could buy those. I don't know. But we were very conscious of trying to maintain a campus for these buildings. So I think when we, hopefully when we get into design, we can really try and reinforce that. We hear you on the building across the way. A lot of the discussion when the village offices were considered as being part of this complex, well, maybe the parking could go over there in their giant garage, but what we're hearing is that they're already maxed out. They don't even have enough cars for the people who are going to be parking spaces for the people who are living there. So I think what we might want to do, and we talked about this earlier, was we may need to look at the parking lot here to try and put some controls on it so that only people who are coming to the library and not commuters taking the train find a way to kind of maximize the spaces for people coming to the library in the parking lot. That's one big item that's come up, and we're not sure exactly how to do that yet.
There'll be an app for that.
There'll be an app for it, yes. But you're absolutely right. It's something that we know is coming, but no matter what, we're going to try and make sure that this is a pedestrian precinct that has enough daylight and character.
This is kind of a bit of an extension of one of the earlier questions, and that is to say, what user constituency, user needs are part of your planning process. Right now, I mean, we know the traditional uses for the library, and our library has been doing a wonderful job about that. There are new uses that are emerging. People who don't have internet access, but they need to be able to come in and get it here. And the library is working valiantly to accommodate that. There are students who come in after school because they don't have a place to go to study. That's a constituency that I think has been growing. And what emergent constituencies, looking forward, are going to have what kind of needs. And right now, we don't have to figure out the programmatic aspects of it, but we do need to think about the design elements that would be required to sort that out. So I'm wondering how you're dealing with that now and what could be done.
I'm going to hand it to Daria, but before I do that, one of the things that we have in our office is the phrase that, frankly, in 1968, this building was built for books, right, and shelves. Today, libraries are being built for books and people, books and workshops, books and meeting. There are a lot of other types of activities that are now coming to the fore that frankly have its base, people coming together. Libraries are much more now community centers than really storage for books. So I think a lot of things that we've been looking at are ways to maximize interaction, ways for people to come together, to meet, to converse, and talk about ideas.
So I think that the internet access problem is going to be addressed through the use of mostly wireless connections for the computers. We've pretty much solved that. It's the power connection. So making sure that the furniture that supports where the computers are going to sit, whether they are connected computers or iPads or anything else in that venue, they just need power. So, and the furniture actually can be a solution for this, having power outlets in the furniture, the desktop, and then connecting to the floor. The floor that we're sitting on now, I can see power outlets that are right there on the floor. That's where your tables sit. So I don't think that's going to be a big problem in the new library. I think that's going to be addressed. The students, they fluctuate. So they're not going to be here in the morning, they're going to be here in the afternoon. There is a designated teen space, but sometimes the students want to bleed over into the adult reading rooms too. So the teen need, the high schoolers will have a place to go in the afternoon. If there's college students who come over from Seton Hall, there's also going to be all the small meeting rooms. So there's some for 2, 4, and 6 people. If they have group projects to work on, they can go then and check out one of those rooms and work in there and be secluded from the rest of the library too, or just gather around a table. And then for your emerging constituents, I think what we see in a lot of places is the need for books that have foreign language books. So for an influx of mostly a Spanish-speaking population, you've got to accommodate their needs and have other books in other languages. Those are also going to be accessible through ebooks and in different ways to do that too. But what John was saying too, the library over the course of the last 20 years, they've emerged as a community center too. So having these big meeting spaces is going to be very important, and that's where the kind of comes in to give us that 75-seat place. Having a space for the kids where they are not using where the adults are is really important, because there are children take up a lot of space. For small bodies, they need a lot of room to spread out. So having their own space and not having to, double book your other meeting room that's downstairs is going to be a huge benefit to the library, because think of all the programs in that could occur simultaneously. So that's going to be great.
Thank you for that. But I was thinking of not just connectivity space, but we needed a lot more dedicated space with workstations available for whoever doesn't have a computer.
But those are part of the plan. So through the programming exercise, we've looked at the number of stations that you currently have and their usage, and then looked at how many more that could be, put into the library, and whether they're at either the computer carrels or just at open tables too. Because some people like to sit in their little cubbiness and be away from everybody, and other people like to actually collaborate with the other people at their table too. So that's something that actually has been addressed, is the number of computer stations that will be available. And there's also a lot of libraries that we work with have iPads you can check out at the front desk. So if all the stations are taken, you can go and check that out for your time that you're here, and then return the iPad when you're done.
Well,
So I just want to take a higher level view of that question, is that, the library staff and the board have pushed H3 very hard on really thinking very flexibly. So all these spaces are very flexible because we can't anticipate what it's going to be 25 years from now. There are some trends, as Darius said, but all these spaces are meant to be very flexible. So we're trying to be very thoughtful about the power needs and the technology needs, but those things are changing very quickly too. So, we're as forward-thinking as we can be, given where we are now, but all the spaces are meant to be flexible as things change.
Well, actually, one story on that was, like the teen space. A lot of libraries past 5-10 years went all in, having a teen space with, giant stadium seating and enclosed zone. And what we're finding out is that a lot of teens, they don't want to be in those quiet spaces, the separated spaces. They want to be out with adults and the general population, as it were, because they want to be socialized. They want to be connected. So, I have a 15-year-old, and he seems to spend all his time with headphones, but he has his headphones on in the living room right next to us. So he's separate but together, and he kind of likes that. And I think what we're finding out in our studies is that the idea of having these segregated peas and carrot type spaces all completely separate is not really the way to go anymore. I think the new technology, the new trends are to trying to create flexible space, that lots of different things can happen in one space, but using the technology, whether it's headphones or little iPads, to allow those things to happen even though they're together.
Hi, good evening. I've been working here for almost 30 years at the library, and want to thank my book group. They seem to all be here. I've been more, the slide wasn't clear. I see you're going to do it in phases. It was suggested. From soups to nuts, how long will the project do you estimate it taking?
Can we say it depends? It depends on funding, right?
So in this slide, basically this is the schedule for the phase 1. So it's basically about 10 months, starting in January of 2021. That's assuming we stayed on track. And then there's a 4-month gap in between, and so that would be the period when. You would move into the new section of the connector, while the phase 2 would start for the 1968 building. And that's a little bit longer. It's about 10 months to a year.
So about 2.5 years?
Wait, can I, before we, can I just say something?
Yeah.
So, I just want to be really clear that this is ideal, right? The village has voted in principle to move forward with this library-only plan, but there isn't a commitment of funding at this point. And, you know, there could likely be a gap, and a large gap between the two phases, depending on what happens with funding.
But the idea is that the 68 building will remain remain active as long as possible. And the idea about phasing it is that, I mean, frankly, you have the ideal situation here. You have a 10,000 square foot building that's not being used right next door. Maplewood has to basically shut down its library to build a second floor on top in order to get their facility up and running. So this can maintain, it can stay exactly as it is until that comes up on board, and then move that over for, you know, maybe a year of time while this is being renovated, then move back. And then you have a full facility together.
Sounds best to both worlds.
And I mean, the design is set up, so phase one could happen and this could stay the way it is. There'll be connections to the new link until phase two happens.
Totally promised I was coming back. That's number two. I have a really quick question that I think you can answer quickly, and then I have a more extensive question. So the first one is, I'm confused about the parking. So you said there are 170 parking spaces available, but
No, 107.
107, so 107 parking spaces available out there, but only this first row is for the library. So does this mean that all of the residential or whatever the other business parking that is limited is now converting to library parking?
I think, you know, we talked about the parking issue because we dealt with it so extensively as a planning group, that it might be worth just briefly describing why we did that, because I think it might be a little bit confusing. Does that make sense?
Should I go into it? I mean, right now, what we were projecting was that there are 28 staff members in the library that we were projecting that would be if both buildings were put together. And then the idea that you may have an additional 30 to 35 cars providing parking for library patrons during the day. I think what's happening is that there are a lot of cars that are parked in that lot that are commuters going to the train station.
No, they're.
They're permanent.
So, I mean, I think that just so everybody understands is that, you know, this is something that we're gonna have to negotiate as we go forward. Right now, what we know is that we're only keeping the parking that we have. But H3 was part of H3's charge was to really look at how could we increase the parking there, not just for the library. You know, the village was hoping to increase it for the village at large. But in the end, that's not feasible, so we're gonna be keeping the parking that we have. It is something that we hope to negotiate, but that's where we are. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine, but we have established a base number of about 55 to 60 spaces that would be primarily library oriented. That would be ideal in the design. You know, where the other 40 go to, I don't know.
Well, that was my easy question, so that complicated everything, sorry. The other question I have is, can you elaborate more and can you look at the slide of the new children's area? And kind of talk a little bit more about what your vision is there for the flex space and, you know, how we're gonna fit more books in. Are we losing that? What happens with that conference room down there? Does that kind of open up and? Yeah.
Well, this is kind of a challenge. So these are things that we won't totally know until we get into schematic design, when more consultants for mechanical, electrical, plumbing are involved. Because the building is increasing in size, you know, currently this is not a sprinkler building. So these are all life safety things that we have to add. So the gas and the water meter room, this is already showing a larger room. Electrical rooms will get a little bit larger. So some of those spaces in gray here is currently the furnace is in this area, but those will increase. And so we've anticipated some space to allocate that, but you know, as we continue forward, we'll understand better the space requirements. In terms of, or your second question was in
Are we losing that conference room or does
Oh,
that?
yeah. Yeah, basically you're losing it, so you're getting a new program room here, which is actually larger.
That is currently staff area. So the children's department is taking up the entire ground floor.
You're talking about the staff area that's kind of shut back behind the
Yeah, that
bathrooms.
you
Okay,
see.
gotcha.
So that expands.
Yeah, so the children's,
I'll show you what is actually the children's room now in that.
so basically the children's room now is, the meeting room is right about there. And the children's is essentially from this line, those are the doors that enter. It's basically this space right here.
Wow.
So you're more than doubling the size of the children's area.
We need it. And then there will be some kind of doors, like glass door type things that go out into that fence, that potentially fenced in garden.
So that's the
area.
main entrance that you have right now. And yeah, we would probably be redoing the door. This wouldn't necessarily be an entrance to the building. It would probably be secured depending on how the library wants to operate that. Essentially, this would be the main entrance coming through the connector with the circ desk right here and kind of like the additional children's staff, so you get good surveillance.
Okay, one more children's question. You said something about letting the children get messy, which is great. So I just want to throw it out there that it would be really helpful to have some kind of paint sink for cleanup.
So we do have a sink right here with a little bit of seating bench and then storage off of that area as well. So, a lot of times there's reading time and there might be some poofs or some sort of comfortable seating.
Costumes, puppets,
Yeah.
arts and crafts supply.
Okay, excellent. All right, I'm sitting down.
Well, I do want to say, when we get to the design phase, all these questions can come up again, and we want to make sure that, we'll write them down now, and we'll put them into the plans, but when we really get to the point where we design the spaces, we want to come back to you all and really vet through all the different functions that you want to have in each one of those rooms.
I'm very interested in the elevators. I'd like to see where on the ground floor there is an elevator.
So the elevator is right here. And then I guess the thing that,
You're pointing right now to.
The brand new in the lake.
In the connector.
it's right here.
Okay.
So this is part of the new construction as part of the connector. This is the new elevator, which is right off of the lobby. And then what happens is on the connector part, because of the floor of the Connet is different than the floor plate of the 68 building. So there's actually a set of stairs here. So you can come out to the 68 building on this level from the elevator here, or you can come up on the upper level for the Connet building. So it's doing the double duty to make it fully accessible.
So the elevator goes from the ground floor to the first floor, and then what happens?
It goes slightly up to the Connet first floor.
What do you mean slightly up?
3 feet, 3 feet.
It's not a full, it doesn't go
It's not
over
a
that
full
floor.
Okay, so on that, in the Connet part, there's supposed to be places for staff and offices, is that right? It's in the Connet part. Okay, so if you had somebody on your staff who broke their leg, would they be able to go up to the staff parts of the building?
Yes, yeah, so in the Connet, it is a very complicated existing layout, but what, we have a series of ramps, because this lower area that used to be originally the children's area, back here, there's a set of ramps for that portion. There's also a little bit of ramping to connect to the connector. These are all based on existing conditions, and then there's a third. We talked about.
Right.
So on the first floor, we talked about there's currently no connection up to this mezzanine second floor of the Connet. So we're actually adding a platform lift up there that allows you to get up to the kind of the pantry lounge for the staff in this additional area here. And then this could also serve as a technical mezzanine if they're doing filming or live streaming for any village functions in the meeting room below.
So a platform lifts people
Yes.
It does? Okay, because this building has to be accessible to everyone.
And actually, that's there's some value in terms of funding. There are specific accessibility grants through New Jersey State that we will be looking at. The library has already sort of scoured all the different funding availabilities. You get some money if you redo this elevator here. We can find a grant to do a ramp to the front of the Kinnett building, a different pot of money. So we are looking for ways to maximize the value for these basic grants.
The town has an aging population. There are people who have never been up there because they can't make the stairs, and they don't realize that if they got a librarian, that librarian could take them up on the elevator. It's got to be smoother.
It's got to be, you know, it's a civil rights issue. We want to make sure that everybody can get anywhere in the complex.
Additional questions or comments?
I know this isn't the architect.
My neighbors.
It's just, this thing about parking to me just doesn't seem like, oh, we'll fix it later. I mean, it's like, so many times you drive by and you can't get a space, and I just end up coming back at night. I live, you know, it's in good weather I can walk, but I don't really want to walk to just return something, you know. Anyway, I just think it has to be a thing because it's why people just don't come, like even for the movies and stuff like that, you're gonna get a ticket. And Maplewood, I know, has free parking. I don't know if they're gonna continue with that.
They have 10 spaces.
They have very little parking, but if your town has, you know, like 4 hours of street parking. But here, if you have to worry about 2 hours and you gotta pay, you know, it's kinda like, build it and they'll come, you think. But no, I mean, this has been the big bugaboo about this place for a long time. And I know I put signs to the South Orange Police, you know, that I'm in this program, it's supposed to be, you know. I haven't gotten a ticket yet, so I really can't complain, but I know a lot of tickets are on the up, so I think it's gotta be a thing, you know, and it's like a priority, like just like, you know, Tony was saying, you have to have access. It's like, you just can't have a library and ask people to raise $12 million and then there's 35 parking spaces. It's just not right.
I'm sorry, I didn't know. Thank you.
I mean, you know, this is also what the current conditions are, right? Their current conditions of the building, we don't have control of that parking lot. I know Melissa in the past has tried to negotiate with the village to get more space for the library, and this is something that the constituents of the village also have to be speaking to the village trustees about. There's only so much that we can do to change that, but it's very clear that a parking garage or even the parking platform is not feasible. So the only way that the library is going to get more parking spaces if we can negotiate to move some of that permanent parking somewhere else.
A lot of their parking is tied up with businesses in the area, people who work, lawyers, people who work in stores, they use those spots, so that's you know, it's a complex issue.
Yep.
Just to, I mean, this is maybe obvious, but we've heard a lot of comments from people, you know, about things on the charts here. Are we gonna have these up posted somewhere in the library, so when patrons come in, they can say, wow, I never heard about this, and they can make comments and suggestions?
We have a comment box on the counter, and there's a place at right on the other side of the reference desk where we have these drawings posted. The danger in posting them without the architects here is that people look at them and say, oh, I don't like this little thing right there, and they haven't thought about the whole flexibility. So Shanice has been back there videotaping this for us so that we can give people the whole thing. There will be copies at the reference desk for anybody who wants to see. For tonight, they're in all the display cases, the one at the back door, the one up here, over there. There's some copies at the reference desk, so you're more than welcome to look up close.
And they're also posted on the village's website.
The ones on the village website, you have to have a magnifying glass, and they're really, and I printed one out. So, and you know, last night at the meeting, no one in the audience had any copies of this. You guys did, maybe you did. but it was sort of hard to follow it. I know at the Bear, they had their blueprints on the wall after they moved along the process. So you could go in and look at it and understand what they were doing. I don't know whether that created a lot of unwanted suggestions, but at least I think it helped educate the public on what was going to be happening in the building. Just looking at these, and again, the colors and everything, is there enough staff space here? You and your staff? I'm just asking, I don't know. It just I know you're pretty crowded here now. Are you going to get more space for your folks?
No, we're not, and I think that's all right. I think that's pretty close to the same as we have, which we
Pretty
would
crowded
have.
in the back.
We would have lost some, I think, had the village offices been here. And, yeah, we really have a brilliant staff, so I wouldn't want to see them making sacrifices, but we didn't want to get excessive with things either. So a lot of times we're out in public, so we use flexible rotating space.
As we say, this is the Board of Ed uses a generational change, and I think you want to kind of make sure you're incorporating things. This was asked before, maybe it was answered. I just noticed on the third floor of the Connor building, there doesn't seem to be an elevator, but I think you explained the platform thing.
Yeah, it's a platform.
Okay, thank you.
The platform is like what they have at the bank on Valley Street, what's the name of that bank? The BCB. There's a little platform lift, they have that little set of stairs where it looks like a little box, and you would put either a wheelchair in there or a person would stand in there, and it would move up. So it's not actually moving to the full floor.
It's not a full elevator because it's only going up 3 feet, and it's open to the room. Anyone who gets in is you're not enclosed in a space. It's just a lift that goes up 3 feet from one level to another.
And that is staff, so it's not going to get heavy usage because we're not anticipating that the staff, wonderful though it is going to go up in number.
This one would be enclosed, but it's not like an elevator in the full-scale elevator. They just basically build walls around what Hildy was describing. But like we've said, it's not getting public use, it's getting staff use.
Additional questions or comments?
I have one more. Sorry.
Nobody's caught. Oh, look at that, she tried to disguise herself.
Darn it. So as far as advocating or helping to advocate for the New Jersey Construction Bond Act, what can we do to help that process? Is a letter writing campaign something that helps? What's something that we civilians can do to kind of up our chances there?
Well, I think it comes down to, we'll be working closely with library staff and the working group to put together the application. I think one of the things, to be quite honest, is a strong sense of fundraising on your own part to make sure that there is some buy-in from the local community. I think goes a long way, that it's not just dependent on the village trustees and the state, that maybe money for furniture, money for equipment comes from your own fundraising aspects, because I think we want to make sure that it's broadly supported, and proof of that is a strong capital campaign. And I think the third piece is that I certainly think once the application goes in, we will all be competing with a bunch of other municipalities in New Jersey. But I will say that what we're trying to do is make sure that the historic aspect is played up. The Canet is a historic treasure, a National Historic District. Not very many other libraries have that. Second, that it's a space that's not used right now, so we can use the rehabilitation grant aspect to do that. If there are any other sort of thoughts that you may have on features of either of these buildings or the neighborhood that could go into the application, whether or not it's a historic thought or maybe a story of the Canet when it was a library, if you were here at that time. It would be very helpful to have all that as part of the community support aspect of the application. Because I think we can the planning and the budgeting, I think we have that all well in hand. But just really putting out there the community support aspect is something that really has to sing through the application. That this is something that South Orange wants, it needs for the library, and that this place is so important to this community that it deserves the funding, honestly minuscule funding from the state in order to maintain its excellence going forward.
And we still have to make the case to the village trustees that the residents of South Orange feel that way. Because the construction bond grant, we don't get it unless the money is matched.
So that's one of the things that I was going to say is that there are other things besides just supporting the application for the Construction Bond Act. Marietta Zacher is here, who's a trustee of the library board, and she's been putting together an advocacy committee so that we can talk to other folks in the village about the library, even if you don't use it, why it's such an important civic institution, why you should support it, so that we can be talking to the village trustees, so we can lay the groundwork. There's also the foundation, which we hope are going to work in partnership with us to, be raising money for this. There's the Friends, so there are lots of ways to get involved and help push it forward, both to get people excited about it and raise some money.
Could we tell the story about Harrison?
Sure.
Maybe, Derry, you want to talk about our angel donor? Or just popcorn?
So in Harrison in Westchester County, there was a gentleman named Ross Halpern, whose dad had just passed away, and walked into the library one day and said, I'd like to, have the library renamed for my father, and here's $1 million for you. So that was actually the catalyst that started the whole renovation of this. And unfortunately, you can't really see, but the front door now has Mr. Halpern's name on it. And it really was the springboard that set us forward. But the rest of the money was raised by the Village of Harrison. And they did have some other donors that stepped forward. Kenneth Cole lives in the neighborhood and was, helped with giving some funds. And some of those very few corporations there. Marmont is one of the people who make ski clothing and stuff. They stepped forward and gave some money too. So it was really, they came together, and it just became a very lovely project. And you wouldn't believe the before pictures. I wish I had some of them. Because the children's department was not in this room. It was a very small area of the building, and really that was their focus. So we had a lot of fun too, doing both the children's department. They do have a dedicated teen space, but I think that other people bleed over there in the off hours. And it was just a wonderful celebration when it opened again, and they got their library back.
I mean, another thing is a lot of people started to come out of the woodwork once it got moving. So there was donors at all different levels. I mean, the main one that Daria talked about was a big one, $1 million. There was a lot of other smaller donations that came forward for some of these smaller features, like this is millwork for the trees on the walls of the children's area. There's kind of like a dollhouse-like structure back here that was donated. And then also they did a brick campaign where everybody, it's $100 a brick, and that becomes part of the paving for the new library. So that's a smaller way to.
I also want to thank the Village Board of Trustees and
Can't hear you, Kathleen.
Sorry, I'll try that again. Thanks to the Village Board of Trustees for forwarding this. Thanks to the Library Board of Trustees for getting it up there. And I guess my question is, on fundraising, at what point do we need to hire a fundraiser to help us move into the next stage? I'm not sure that fundraising has been a great strength of us as a grassroots group. And I'm also wondering when we get the beautiful pictures that we can show to people and the glossy color photos so that we can get people excited. I've been to both presentations and I understand sort of what the spatial setup will be, but those aren't what I want to show people to get them all
excited about going out and persuading people?
I would say actually as part of the application, we will have a few drawings put into the application, but it's mostly going to be a narrative as to what's important. I think in terms of the regulations as part of the grant application, which is mostly data supporting what the project is. But soon after, if the funding comes together, we do need to switch very quickly into a quiet campaign where we can find donors or find funding that is really in the family, so that we can amass an amount of funding that has a very large impact when you start to go to a public campaign. Because you don't want to start from scratch. You want to make sure that you have some donors in hand that are substantial enough so that when you get to the point where you do announce publicly that you are doing a thing and you have the glossy brochure and all the renderings at that point, then it's much smoother. It's much harder at the very beginning, and we will provide you with all that information and renderings. But there are a couple of phases that need to happen. The first phase, obviously, being making sure that we can get the grant funding from the state. Second, the quiet campaign, where we start to identify donors. And third, the public campaign.
Someone just asked me to make a quick comment, which responds to both the story of the community and also to an earlier comment about how we know what the library needs will be. And it really comes down to how closely the library surveys the community and has focus groups, and how closely the staff tracks what the community needs are. And for example, the thing that she asked me to mention was tomorrow, Halloween looks like it was going to be rained out, the downtown Halloween that's usually in Spiata Park, and it's taking place here at the library tomorrow, Halloween. You know, when there have been disasters, I'm sure you've all seen that people are welcome to come to the library for heat, for computers, for electricity. Our library does an incredible number of things. Our teen librarian, Keisha Miller, is super plugged into the teen library community and runs one of the most innovative teen programs in the state, perhaps in the nation. So I think that our staff is incredibly strong in terms of keeping in touch with the community, assisting the community, and knowing what the community needs, and that should be a big part of our story. And now I'll hand this to you.
Oh, I'm really sorry. I may have missed this part of the discussion, but what will happen to the beautiful building next door where my daughters learn to read and love books?
We will save it. The Kinet will be a major part of this project.
What part?
It will be essentially it will be part of the front entrance to the new library.
Part of, you're going to change that building?
No, we're going to connect to it.
Keep it.
Other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming out tonight.